Makita's 8.5-inch compound slide miter saw just showed up, and I'm curious if it's gonna live up to Makita's reputation. Today I'm testing it on real deck building cuts to see if it delivers on durability, accuracy, and power. Let's see what this thing can do. Brand new, still in the box, tape still here. Let's open this up and check this out. Now, this is an 8.5. I have a couple different 7.25-inch cordless saws, and they are ranging anywhere from okay to premium. So I wanted to test this saw to see where it lands in those realms, because this saw is kind of a upper end saw. It actually costs just as much or sometimes more than its 12-inch cousin. Okay, so these 7.25 to 8.5-inch saws are really made for a finer cut, for trim details, and finer cuts that you're gonna make. And we're gonna relate this to deck building, okay? I'm not gonna get onto the inside of the house and how it can work for your coping and finish and all that. This is mostly because this is an outside saw. This is gonna be in the rain, it's gonna get wet, it's gonna take some abuse, it's gonna have wet sawdust all over it and that kind of thing. So our tools take a lot more abuse than standard tools will because they are made for the elements. With that being said, I can't wait any longer, man. We gotta bust this thing out. So I did happen to bring, this is a 40-volt tool. I did bring one 40-volt battery with me from the job site to be able to check this saw out. This is a 4-amp-hour 36-volt battery, and it is fully charged. Just kidding. Comes with an 8.5-inch blade. Dust bag. Oh, look at that. Nice looking saw. One thing that a lot of guys may use is a dust extraction unit. Usually we do not. So this Viper tube that's sitting on the side of this, probably not gonna make the cut. But that's where you can actually put on this dust bag and it just kind of fits on by friction. One other thing, it does come with a plastic square, probably for dialing in the saw in case it's out of square, and a stationary clamp for if you're trying to cut something small and you don't want to cut off your fingers. It's a good thing to have. Or possibly for repetition cuts where you're putting this as a stop block. That's what I use these a lot for, is if I have something short within inches of the blade and I just want to keep running something in and cutting it, these work great for that. So we'll get into that in a little bit. All right guys, so we have the saw ready to go. This saw does have a lot of features in it, and we'll go over all the ones that we've read about and that we've discovered while we were unpacking the saw. We have the blade installed, and one quick thing about the blade installation is I did double check on the manual because I was having something kind of catch when I had the blade on there. So one of the internal flange that goes in before the blade was turned backwards, so I had to turn that around, and then everything went smoothly after that. So you just got to be aware of the orientation of the two washers that go on either side of the blade when you install the blade. Make sure that they're orientated the proper direction. So there's a little lip on one side of one of the washers that has to face in to the saw towards the motor, not towards the blade. And once we got that handled, it worked just fine. So a couple things right out of the gate. If you're just running this saw on a table, not on a stand, which we would be putting this on a stand, but for the video, we're just using it loose. We just took it out of the box, okay? So there's a elevation knob underneath the slide area that keeps this saw from wanting to tip. It's adjustable. So it will move back and forth as you turn the saw, but I would normally keep this a little bit shy of the thickness of the table. So there might be just a little bit of motion, but if this was off the table, then the saw can tilt like this, okay? With this on here, obviously the saw doesn't tip. So it's just something that you might want to be aware of if you're not mounting this to a chop saw stand, that you might want to make sure that this is active and close to where you need it so that it can roll back and forth without dipping the front of the saw, because that could be dangerous. One of the things I like about the saw, it's a hybrid. It's mostly forward controls for your miters and your bevels, and a locking mechanism right here. But then there's a couple commands in the back of the saw for tilting it a certain direction or overgoing or overachieving past a 45-degree angle. You might need a couple extra degrees. There's a couple settings on the back of the saw that allow you to catch an extra 3 degrees of bevel, or if you need to go, this saw will go 60-degree miters both ways, which usually I'm not used to on such a small saw. Usually you can get more angle going one direction, but not the other direction on your miters. Good job on that, Makita. I really like how you've done 60 degrees both ways. I wish that it did bevel a little bit more than 48 degrees, but at least you gave us 3 extra degrees to get those funky cuts done. The saw is kind of locked in place right now. So far, the only thing that I do not like about the saw, I love how they have this locker right here. Instead of a knob that you have to twist to get this to lock in place, this is a positive stop lock. This saw, when in transport and you're moving it from place to place, this will not move until you unloosen it. I just wish that they had some way to lock it either in the front position or a way somewhere along the way if we wanted to lock this down for maintenance or working on it, that it didn't slide around. When we were replacing the blade, this saw kept moving. So there's another locker right here for the saw head to move up and down. What I did like though is you can lock this into place. It won't move up and down while you're doing your blade changes and that kind of thing. But the saw still moves back and forth while you're trying to work on it. It's just a little bit of a hassle. I'm not gonna complain. That's not a deal breaker by any means. It's just something that bugged me, so I don't know if it would bug you or not. Leave a comment below and let me know. So normally when we set up a saw for the morning, in the evening when we're done for the day, that gets locked, and then usually I turn the saw to the side. So to turn it on a miter, you have the main knob right here, and then you push this down, and then it'll turn to whatever you want. So then I would go ahead and lock that into place. Now the saw is ready for taking away, transporting, and that kind of thing. It's locked right, left, forward, backward. You can pick it up. It's only 35 pounds, I think, so it moves pretty easy. Let's go over those commands again, because it's a two-way lever. This positive locker, there's different locations on the miter gauge which will lock this in place. So it locks at 0. Now if I want it to unlock, I push this down, and I have to have this loose right here, okay? Once that's loose, this will turn. If I put the locker back up, it'll just lock to the next available locking position, which is 15 degrees. You can see the notches in the plate. That's where you have positive locking stops. So there's 0, 15 degrees, 22.5, 31.6, which I hardly ever use, but sometimes it comes in handy on stairs, and then 45-degree angle works really well. I know that's a roofing measurement, a degree, but it also sometimes works out for stairs, because a lot of our stairs are 32 to 34 degrees, something like that. So again, if I want to get out of that 15 degrees, I just push this with my thumb, and I can keep going. And if I want to lock on 22.5, then I got to push this back up. Now it locks on 22.5, and this will not lock. If I'm gonna run that angle for a while, I may go ahead and lock it down. Now it's like double locked, and that should be a really accurate cut multiple times, over and over and over. So I'm gonna loosen this up, push this down, go back to 0, lock it at 0. There we go. So you're not pulling anything off the back of the saw. Everything's forward. Now if I wanna do a bevel, you're gonna have to do a couple things. You're gonna have to move your fence. The fence is adjustable on the top side so that you can get those bevels out of the saw. So you're gonna have to move this fence all the way over. And if you wanna bevel this way, you're gonna have to take this side off. But for now, we're just gonna move it like that so I can just show you. And then there's also a part of the table, if you have these two knobs right here and here, this knob right here, you loosen that, you can pull this table out about 4 or 5 inches on each side. It gives you a little bit more stability for your workpiece. Okay, so now that we have the fence moved and I want to run, let's just say a 45-degree bevel. So then I'm going to turn the inside knob and loosen it. Now that loosens the saw, so it'll automatically stop on a 45, and then I can lock that back in. I can also, and again, that's what's cool about forward controls. You don't have to reach to the back of the saw to loosen it up. You can just take it to whatever degree you want, 30 degrees, lock it in, and you're good to go. So loosen that down like that. We're locking at 45. If you need to go past 45 degrees, this is where you're gonna have to reach over, and there's a little guide on the back of the saw right here that tells you that. If you wanna go past 45, you're gonna have to pull this lever, and that'll let you get to 48. And once you're done with that, you can always pull it back and lock it back onto 45. If you like where the angle is, then you just twist this forward part of the knob, and there you go. There's no positive locking stopper mechanism on the back of the saw to get your bevels to a certain way. You just have to figure that out on your own. So like if I want to go to 22.5, usually there's not a 22.5 marking on the back of the saw. Sometimes I'll ink one on there with a pen, or I'll scribe it with a knife or something like that, just so that I know exactly where that 22.5 inch mark is. It just speeds things up instead of me sitting there with my bad eyesight trying to figure out where it is. Another thing I like is because we work year round here and it gets really dark in the winter, there is a light, an LED light, which makes a big difference when you're trying to cut in the dark. So that really helps us find where the mark is that we're trying to achieve. So there's a 90-degree angle. Let's pull this up. You can see right here, there's a lot of light right on where the cut piece would be. So let's just say I have a mark or something I'm trying to get to. Boom, there it is. Okay, so another cool feature is a depth of cut, like a stopping mechanism. So right now it's going full depth, but if you only want to cut a certain amount of depth in the workpiece, you pull this out and then you can go so deep. And then if you want to cut a little bit deeper than that, you just turn this, and you'll notice as I turn this, it allows me to go down into the cut more. So if you got to cut out a rabbet, or you want to only go down so far into the cut, and if you need to make multiples of it, that's a great way to do it. So on a 45-degree angle, we can get an 8.5 inch depth of cut. So I'm gonna easily be able to cut through a piece of 5.5 inch, no problem. I could probably get through a piece of multi-width as well, which I do have somewhere, and we'll try that a little bit later. So you can get through those, but if you're cutting at 0 degrees, you can actually get through 12 inches of depth from end to end on this saw, which is really important when you're trying to make those cuts on 2x12s and things like that. This saw will not cut through 4x material. It's gonna get stuck, it's gonna get caught up. Well, maybe it will. I'm kind of curious. I was just gonna tell you that this isn't gonna work for a certain cut, but I'm kind of wondering, and I didn't read anywhere on here that we have a 3.5 inch depth of cut. 2 3/4 is what it'll cut through. This would be the ultimate saw if it actually cut through 3.5 inches, because this is a common depth of us. 2 3/4 ain't bad though. A lot of your trim, like your 2 1/4 inch and 2.5 inch trims, will clear this saw, but it's not gonna clear a 3.5 inch cut, unfortunately. That was never the intention of this saw. This is rough framing. This is not fine finish, okay? So we will not be cutting any 4x materials with this saw, but we can cut 2x10s with it, or 2x12s, or things like that, pressure treated. A lot of the time, I don't pull this saw out of my arsenal until I'm cutting my PVC, my trim, my decking, the finished cuts, things that need to look nice, and something I just want butter. I want buttery smooth cuts that look really good, that I don't have to mess around with, and I know that are accurate. That's what this saw's for. This is not my workhorse, okay? We have a 12-inch compound slide miter saw for that. We are professionals, so we do like to have good tools when we're doing this kind of work. Okay, for this video, I'm not gonna try to even cut that 4x6 because it says right on the box it won't. So I'm pretty sure what's gonna happen, it usually gets caught up right here, right on this mechanism right here. I'm seeing 3 3/8, man. Okay, curiosity, right? We gotta know. It's 3.5 plus. Our first cut, curiosity, I have to know, how far through this 4x6 can we get? Now, to be fair, we're gonna have to move this over enough to where it completely engulfs the saw, all right? Now, I'm gonna go ahead and turn my LED on just so I can see a little bit better. And I'm gonna go ahead and try to make this cut all the way through this board. It ain't gonna do it, but it's gonna get close, I think. Or let's see if it only goes to 2 3/4 like the box says. You ready? Ah, there it is. So what's it touching? Like I said, it's hitting right here, right on this part of the saw. You just can't get through it. Now it did start to cut through before I got to that part of obstruction. And they even flattened it out to get the maximum depth of cut, but it's not enough to get through a 4x. But we got close. It's a pretty clean cut. The box says 2 3/4. I say 3. Wow, they're being conservative on that, man. 3 1/16. I mean, if you want to max things out, they probably don't want you to do that, but I'm always exploiting my tools. So, and that looks like a pretty square cut. I would say 3 inches, man. You could probably get through 3 inches of material. Oh, one more. If you need to tilt the saw to the right, again, it's forward controls, but you're gonna have to unlock it. There's a lever that you need to pull forward, but it's not on the back of the saw. It's actually in the front part of the back of the saw. But that allows you to tilt 45 degrees the other way. And then there's an onboard wrench right here that helps you with getting the guard off to get to the saw blade and then to get the saw blade off the saw. Onboard tool storage is awesome. It's always nice and convenient to have that on board with you. Okay, so I don't know if you guys heard that. When I pull this back over, it's gonna click. There we go. Now it's back on its positive stop. I have to tighten this back up to make sure that this doesn't turn. The last thing you want to do is when you're using your saw like this is to not lock this down and then your saw's wanting to move while you're trying to make a cut. It's very dangerous, and I've done it before, you know, as a pro. I'm in a rush, blah, 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 get it done. Make sure that you're always locking that after every cut just to make sure it stays nice and tight. Enough about the features of the saw. I think you guys get it. Let's go ahead and make a few cuts and see where we end up. I'm cutting PVC. I'm just gonna cut a 90 just for giggles, just for starters, okay? We'll take a look at it. Man, that's a nice buttery cut. I mean, it is a brand new saw with a brand new blade, but I'll cut it finished side up. That was upside down, really. But I think I use this board in heat bending, and it has a little bit of a cup to it. So it wants to roll a little bit on the table. So that's why I turned it upside down. So there's a trigger lock right here. You have to push this down to pull the trigger. All right, so this is a 8.5 inch 45 tooth blade by Makita, and brand new. It's making some great cuts. That's almost like sharp enough to cut my finger on if I roll it the wrong way on there. You know, as far as a 90 degree or a 0 degree cut, I say 90 degrees, but it's actually 0. So let's put it on a 45. I gotta take the locker off. But usually when I'm doing this, I'm gonna push this back up so it locks right on 45. So I don't have to guess where 45 is, it's right there. So let's just cut this board in half. You can kind of see where the blade's gonna cut. Okay, let's just say that's where I wanna cut my line. And it's dark out, I wanna get close. Well, it looks to me like this light is projecting the blade. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but you can see that there's a shadow line on each side of where the blade is. So if I wanted to cut right down the middle of the line, I would put my piece there. If I wanna cut to this side of the blade, I would put it here. And if I want to cut to the other side of the blade, then I would put it there. So let's see if this cuts right on there. So all I'm gonna do before I even pull the trigger, it's pretty close, but as I bring the blade down, you can kind of see the shadow it's casting on the workpiece. That's pretty cool, because it does give you kind of an idea where to be, and then you always can double check it before you make your cut. So that is a handy feature. It's not a laser, but you don't really need it. If the LED is shining the right way, you can just cut it like so. So let's go ahead and make this cut. All right, so that is a 45 degree cut, which 2 45 degree angles make a 90. And that's what your miter is gonna be like, which looks pretty good. For a lot of what deck builders do, this is a pretty common cut. So it has to be accurate, it has to look good. Now, because this board is cupped, obviously these angles aren't gonna fit right unless I cut both of these the same way on the saw. That really isn't the test. The test is to see how well the miter fits together and if the lines line up, and they look pretty darn good. So you can do your glue and screw or your biscuit joints or your 2P10 or whatever, and it has a really nice cut. Both of these edges look really good. So the blade's cutting really well. So now that we've cut a piece of PVC, something that deck builders are gonna do quite a bit of is just cutting standard pressure treated lumber. Again, probably not the primary use for me for this saw, but let's just see how it cuts a 2x10. This is the secondary auxiliary saw, right? So this is our premium for our finish cuts. But then when somebody's using our big chop saw, sometimes we'll bust this out. If we have a lot of repetitive cuts to make, we'll go ahead and set up this as a secondary unit so that we can have another guy cutting on it. And what's cool about this saw, it's an 8.5-inch blade. The blades are a lot cheaper than a 12-inch blade. So if I do have a lot of pressure treated to cut, I may consider either A, swapping the blade into lesser teeth and running that as a framing saw, or I'll probably, more than less, I'll probably keep this as a nice finish saw and use the muscle when I need it. Except when we're in those times where there's like, if there's 3 guys on team and one guy's cutting out parts for skirting and another guy wants to start cutting up stair framing or something like that, then this will cut through 1.5 inches, no problem. So let's check it out. And I'm telling you what, man, when a saw is new and it's just working right and the blade's brand new, it's like I say butter. It's a butter cut. So it just feels so good. There's no smoke. There's no burning. It just goes right through it. It's super safe. A sharp blade is a safe blade. It makes a really nice cut on the wood, and it's nice and square and straight, going through 9.5 inches of material. As long as you have the board up against the fence nice and snug. And if you wanted to, you know, you could always pull this fence back in if you're not doing a bunch of miters and bevels and you're just making straight cuts, and that helps keep things up safely up against the edge of the fence. Just depends what you're doing with the saw, but it has the versatility to do that. So one more thing I want to try and cut is a piece of some wider material of our 7.25 inch TimberTech AZEK. So I'm going to bring that over. And then I was curious, the reason I had the 4x6 out is it's 3.5 inches. So I kind of wanted to know if it would work for a block, but it will not on this particular saw. Sometimes a 3.5 inch piece is at the same elevation as this, but it looks like it's going to be 2 pieces of 2x, which will fit this height. No, that's too tall too. So we got a funky height. So you're gonna have to come up with what's maybe the proper, maybe it's a piece of 2x and this is a little too low. So I'm not sure exactly what's gonna fit here for your elevation. If you wanna make some blocks or something, let's just say you're on a bigger table and you just need something to hold the edge of the piece up. The stuff I have isn't gonna work. I would have to actually fab up something, maybe 1.25 inches, to make this elevation right. Not a deal breaker. You just gotta figure out what it is you need and then implement that into your system. I'm gonna mount this to a table, and this is gonna go into our cut hub, and then this saw is gonna replace the Metabo HPT saw we have because that battery platform has failed us pretty bad. This Makita battery platform, as far as if you guys wanna talk about that for a minute, I've had a lot of luck with. Now it's a newer platform. The 40 volt stuff, I have had a lot of success with. I haven't had any problems with those batteries. They seem to be lasting, but I've only had them for like 8 months. So far, so good. But that's 8 months of 5 days a week, in and out, multiple charges, multiple batteries. So just something to consider your battery platform. It's great having cordless tools. I love it. But the battery platform can get you on certain brands. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about the saw before I make those last cuts. There is a dust extraction button right here to run your shop vac, but it has to be a Makita shop vac. There is a wireless function as well on the other side of the saw, right here. It's Bluetooth, I think, but it's a wireless function on the saw. It allows it to work with a vacuum, and that's what this component was here. It hooks up where you take this off. So you hook this up to here. This hooks up to the side of the saw, and then this hooks up to your vacuum right here. And then every time you turn on the saw, it wirelessly turns on the vacuum at the same time. So that's a pretty cool feature. We don't use that too much where I'm from because we catch a lot of sawdust. Let me show you guys. In those few cuts that we made, that's how much sawdust we generated off of 4 or 5 cuts. When it's winter and it's wet, we're making a lot of cuts through wet materials. That's gonna cake up and it's just gonna clog the saw, and I've never had luck with using that kind of a combination, so I don't use that. That's just me. All right, let's grab that last board. This is a common cut for us. This is a piece of TimberTech AZEK multi-width, and it's 7.25 inches wide. It says that it'll cut a 7.5 inch depth of cut on a 45-degree angle. So this is 7.25. It looks like it's easily gonna make this cut, but I'm gonna go ahead and make the cut just to show you guys. There it is. That'll make all of our miters for all of our 45s clean. And I can go up to 60 degrees. Let's see if it'll cut a 60-degree angle. Let's max this thing out just for giggles. Actually 61, according to this guide. Will it do a 60? Ooh, no, it won't. It's not gonna do 61, but it'll do 45. I bet you it'll do a 61 on a piece of narrower material. Yeah, it'll cut a 5.5 inch wide board at 61 degrees, but not a 7.5 inch board. One last part that came with the saw is a material, I call it like a clamp, a material clamp. It can change in elevation. Let me show you kind of what we use it for. So let's just say you need a repetitive cut of 5 inches. So you can put this in here. There's a bar that has a knurled edge, and that's gonna fit down into this slot. There's one on each side of the saw. And then you're gonna put this part on, and you're gonna spin that down and lock it into position. We can adjust this a little bit to clear the fence, whatever. And then we're gonna turn this knob to lock down this part so it does not move. So if you're doing a sketchy cut and you don't wanna get your fingers near the blade, that's what this is good for. You know, I can still move it a little bit, but it's definitely way safer than trying to hold it in place. If you have weak hands or you got carpal tunnel or something, this might be a good option. It does take a lot longer to make your cuts this way, but if you're using it for repetition, there's no other good way to clamp something down as a material stopper to get that repetitive cut made. I always keep them handy. Well, that's a lot stiffer now. I can move it a little, but you gotta really bang this to get it to move. So for those repetitive cuts, that's a cool little feature to have on your saw, okay? And then when you're done with it, you just pick it up, pull it, whatever, move it out of the way, and you're done. Cool little accessory. All right, guys, so final thoughts. I think that if you have $720 laying around, this is an excellent saw for finish work. It's not gonna be your everyday framer. I wouldn't use this as my #1 tool for chop saws. I have a 12-inch compound slide miter saw by DeWalt that I use that's a workhorse every day. But when you need the finesse, the finer cuts, and a backup saw to go with your main saw, this is an excellent choice for that. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this to anybody, and I wouldn't hesitate to go out and purchase one either. As a matter of fact, I've got a 7.25 inch little DeWalt saw sitting right here. There's a reason that saw is sitting right there. It doesn't quite make it on the job site, but this saw will. So we are gonna implement this because of the battery platform, because of the quality, the longevity of the Makita brand. And another thing I didn't really talk about during this video, these holes for this knurled part that's going in here will also work for a chop saw hood, which helps save our saws in the rain. So we use it called a chop shop, and it covers the saw. It helps collect the sawdust, so we would take this off, and the sawdust just sprays into the back of this chop saw hood, and then it collects at the base of the saw, and it keeps the motor dry. The one thing that's most important is that this motor stays dry. And then the trigger mechanism is the second thing that you really need to stay dry. So we would leave this saw in the up position like this, so it pulls this as far back as possible inside the chop saw hood so that the trigger mechanism and the motor stay dry, and then this saw is gonna last a lot longer in the elements than it would if we just let it sit in the rain. Let's see how it does after 6 to 8 months. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.